What if I told you that the military's most stressful, financially terrifying relocation orders? I mean, being forced to move your entire family to Hawaii could actually be this multi-million-dollar real estate loophole.
Oh, I'm sure it sounds completely absurd to most people.
Right, like disguised as a massive headache, receiving a permanent change of station or a PCS to Oahu sounds like the ultimate dream until you actually look at the housing market.
Yeah, the sticker shock is real.
Trying to buy a house in one of the most expensive zip codes in the country on a mid-level military salary, it literally feels like trying to buy a Ferrari on a skateboard budget.
It genuinely induces a state of panic for most families.
Which is
Which is why, welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking this really comprehensive step-by-step VA home buying guide from Kristy and Austin Home Group.
yeah, and it's a fantastic breakdown.
The mission here is to look at the cold, hard mechanics of a Hawaii PCS to join base Pearl Harbor Hickam in the year 2026. We're going to see how military families navigate this really unique geographical and financial puzzle and, turn a temporary 3-year assignment into serious long-term wealth.
And to ground this in reality, the guide follows a central case study, right? A woman named Sarah Chen.
Exactly. And Sarah's situation is it's incredibly relatable for anyone listening who has ever faced a daunting move. It's late 2025. She's an E6, which means she's a petty officer first class in the Navy.
An information systems technician, I think it said.
Yep, that's right. She's married to David, who works a remote part-time job, and they have a 3-year-old daughter. So they're sitting in this rented townhouse in Norfolk, Virginia, when Sarah opens an email and boom, orders to report to Oahu by July 2026.
Man, just put yourself in those shoes for a second. You have to move your toddler across an ocean to an island where, like, a gallon of milk costs $8 and somehow find a place to live.
The initial shock is totally rational. But what the guide meticulously breaks down through Sarah's journey is that buying a home on Oahu isn't about having some secret fortune stashed in an offshore account.
Right.
It is entirely about understanding and aggressively leveraging specific military benefits. Before anyone can even start daydreaming about palm trees and island neighborhoods, we really have to bridge that mental gap between Hawaii is way too expensive and the actual mechanical reality of a military budget.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if you're listening, you might be raising an eyebrow right now. To bridge that gap, we have to look at the math. How does an E6 salary even begin to touch Hawaiian real estate?
Well, the foundation of the entire strategy rests on something called the Basic Allowance for Housing, or BAH.
Okay.
Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam falls under the Honolulu County Military Housing Area. For the year 2026, an E6 with dependents, like Sarah, receives a BAH of $3,912 every single month.
Wait, hold on. Almost $4,000 a month just for housing.
That's for housing. And the kicker, it is a tax-free allowance.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and when you run the numbers, a guaranteed $3,912 a month can comfortably support a purchase price in the $575,000 to $650,000 range.
That's a huge chunk of change.
It is, but having the monthly cash flow is only half the battle. To actually unlock that purchasing power without draining your life savings, you have to pair the BAH with the VA loan. In a high-cost market like Hawaii, the VA loan acts as an absolute superpower.
So, I mean, I know the VA loan is a great benefit, but what makes it a superpower specifically for Honolulu?
Well, first, it requires $0 for a down payment.
Nothing.
Nothing out of pocket for the down payment. Second, there is no private mortgage insurance, or PMI. For a civilian buying a home with less than 20% down, PMI is this mandatory fee tacked onto the mortgage just to protect the lender.
Sorry, I've had to pay that. It's the worst.
Bypassing that alone saves a VA buyer $200 to $400 every single month. But the most critical update for 2026 is the removal of county loan limits for eligible veterans with full entitlement.
Okay, let me stop you there because full entitlement sounds like government jargon. What does that actually mean for the listener?
Fair enough. Entitlement is simply the specific dollar amount the Department of Veterans Affairs guarantees to repay the lender if you default on the loan. It's basically the government's skin in the game.
Got it.
Full entitlement just means you don't currently have an active VA loan anywhere else. Because the VA lifted the specific loan caps for buyers with full entitlement, Sarah isn't restricted by arbitrary county limits anymore. She can borrow exactly what her income and BAH can support.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. $0 down and no loan limits. That sounds like a recipe for getting completely in over your head. I mean, handing out massive mortgages with zero skin in the game is exactly what caused the 2008 financial crisis. How on earth is this safe?
What's fascinating here is the underlying financial security of the BAH itself. A civilian relying purely on variable income, say, sales commissions, or a job that might be downsized, takes on a massive risk with a zero-down mortgage.
Oh, absolutely.
But the BAH is guaranteed by the federal government, and it is explicitly tied to the cost of living for that specific zip code. The military has already calculated the local economic data. They know exactly what it costs to live there.
So they've already done the math for you.
Exactly. So the allowance safely covers the mortgage. It completely shifts a family's financial mindset. If you pay rent, you are effectively taking that guaranteed government money and using it to pay off your landlord's mortgage. When you buy, you're using the military's money to build your own personal equity.
That makes a lot of sense. The risk profile is totally different, but there is a fee to use this loan, right? Like the VA funding fee.
Yeah, there is a 2.15% funding fee for first-time use. Most buyers simply roll that directly into the total loan amount rather than paying it up front. However, the guide notes a crucial exception.
Which is?
That fee is completely waived if the buyer has a service-connected disability rating. In Sarah's case, by combining her massive BAH, the zero-down VA loan perks, and her husband's part-time income, she was formally pre-approved for $640,000.
Boom. So the ceiling is unlocked. We know the money is there. And this is but $640,000 in the Midwest buys a sprawling estate. In Hawaii, on an island where space is incredibly limited, what does that actually buy?
It's a totally different ballgame.
Right. We need to transition from the budget spreadsheet to the physical map of Oahu. Because if you have orders to work on the base, your daily reality is going to be dictated by island traffic and getting through security gates.
Topography and logistics dictate everything on Oahu. You cannot just pick a pretty neighborhood on a map and call it a day. Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam is a massive combined Navy and Air Force installation. It encompasses Pearl Harbor, Hickam Air Force Base, and Ford Island.
It's basically its own city.
It is. To get to work, you have to funnel through specific security checkpoints. The main ones are the Nimitz Gate, which operates 24/7, along with the Makalapa, O'Malley, and Borchers Gates.
And the guide highlights a major infrastructure update that completely changed the game in 2026. The Halawa Gate permanently closed in April.
That closure caused a massive ripple effect in local real estate. Anyone who historically lived in certain neighborhoods and relied on the Halawa Gate for their morning commute suddenly had to reroute to Makalapa or Nimitz.
Which sounds awful.
On an island with intense rush hour traffic, adding 15 minutes to a commute changes everything. Conversely, 2026 also saw the opening of the new Skyline Rail Station right at the Makalapa Gate.
Okay, so if we connect this to the bigger picture, infrastructure changes like a permanent gate closure or a new commuter rail line, they don't just affect traffic. They fundamentally alter real estate desirability. They dictate where a military family can realistically live without losing their mind.
Perfectly said.
I always think of choosing an Oahu neighborhood like operating a giant slider scale on a soundboard. On one end, you have commute sanity. On the other end, you have house size. You can't have both turned all the way up. You have to slide the dial somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, that's a great way to visualize it.
So let's say I'm moving there and I want my commute sanity turned all the way up to maximum. I want to be as close to work as humanly possible. Where am I looking, and what does my $640,000 buy?
You are looking at the Salt Lake or Aliamana neighborhoods.
Mm-hmm.
These are incredibly close to the base, offering a quick 5 to 10 minute commute to the Makalapa Gate. The prices are generally between $350,000 and $550,000.
Oh, that's well under budget.
It is. It's heavily populated by military families, and it sits right by that new Skyline Rail Station. But the trade-off on your slider scale is space. The inventory there is almost exclusively condominiums. For Sarah and her husband, with a toddler and a lot of gear, a condo just felt a bit too tight.
Okay, so let's push the slider a bit more toward house size. I'm willing to drive a little further if I can actually get a small yard.
Then you move out to Aiea or Pearl City. Your commute bumps up to about 10 to 20 minutes to the Nimitz or Makalapa Gates. The price range jumps to the $500,000 to $750,000 mark.
So pushing the top of Sarah's budget.
Exactly. But here, you get a true suburban feel. You can find older, plantation-style homes with real character, actual yards, and very strong school districts.
What if I'm stubborn? What if I absolutely refuse to live in an older home? I want maximum house size, brand new construction, community pools, the whole 9 yards. Where do I have to go, and what is the catch?
To get that, you have to go to West Oahu. Areas like Eua Beach, Kapolei, and the massive new master-planned community called Ho'opoli, The homes there are gorgeous brand new floor plans in the $550,000 to $850,000 range.
Oh, nice. But the catch.
The commute. You are driving 20 to 35 minutes down the H1 freeway, which is notorious for traffic, just to get to the Nimitz or Borchers gates. For Sarah, combining that morning rush hour with dropping her daughter off at daycare made West Oahu a complete deal breaker.
Yeah, that seems exhausting. So if you want to save your BAH, let's say you want a budget option to pocket some cash, where do you look?
Waipahu is often considered the budget pick. You can find properties ranging from $450,000 to $700,000 with a moderate 10 to 20-minute commute. Alternatively, if you're single or a couple without kids and you want to be close to the nightlife of Waikiki, you might look at Honolulu neighborhoods like Kalihi or Moanalua, which run $400,000 to $650,000.
But the guide notes that Sarah didn't pick any of those. She ended up sliding the scale right to the middle and choosing Mililani.
She did. Mililani sits right in the center of the island. It's a 20 to 30-minute commute down the H2 freeway to the H1. Homes there are priced between $700,000 and $1 million.
So definitely on the higher end.
It is, but it offers a true mainland suburb feel. Excellent schools, tree-lined streets, and because it sits at a higher elevation, the weather's noticeably cooler. It offered the best balance for her family's lifestyle.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because picking a neighborhood on a map is one thing. Actually executing a massive real estate transaction from an ocean away is another. How does a sailor sitting at a desk in Virginia physically buy a house in Hawaii before she even moves there?
It requires tactical execution and a specific military benefit called Permissive Temporary Duty, or PTDY.
What's that?
This allows service members to take up to 10 days of non-chargeable leave, specifically for the purpose of house hunting. Sarah flew out to Oahu in March 2026. Because she had done her research and narrowed down her target neighborhoods, she only needed to use 4 days of her PTDY to aggressively tour 11 different homes.
Wow, that's efficient. And she found a 3-bedroom townhome in Mililani and decided to put in an offer. But this brings up a huge question. In a highly competitive, desirable market like Hawaii, why would a seller ever choose a VA loan offer over a clean cash offer?
It's a tough sell sometimes.
Right, because everyone knows the VA has incredibly strict appraisal rules. If I'm a seller, I don't want to deal with government red tape. I want the cash. How do you actually win?
That is the exact hurdle that frustrates so many military families. Sellers are hesitant because the VA requires the home to meet minimum property requirements.
The MPRs.
Right. The VA appraiser isn't just looking at the value of the home, they're acting as a shield for the veteran. They will flag a home for peeling paint, a degraded roof for moisture issues, and they will demand the seller fix those issues before the loan is approved. The government does not want a veteran moving into a money pit.
Which is great for the buyer, but terrifying for the seller.
Exactly why winning the offer is purely about positioning. And that requires a highly connected, military-savvy local real estate agent. You cannot use your cousin who happens to have a license in another state. In Sarah's case, her agent, Kristy, was heavily embedded in the Oahu market.
So it's all about reputation.
100%. When the seller's agent saw Kristy's name on the offer, they recognized her reputation. They knew she understood how to proactively navigate the VA appraisal process so the deal wouldn't fall apart at the last minute. That local networking and trust completely mitigated the perceived risk of the VA loan in the seller's eyes.
And having that local, savvy agent unlocks another mechanism that frankly blew my mind: seller concessions.
Oh, this is a huge one. The VA allows sellers to pay up to 4% of the total purchase price toward the buyer's closing costs. That includes things like loan origination fees, appraisal fees, and title insurance.
It's like going to a car dealership, negotiating the price of the car, and then getting the dealer to agree to pay for your gas and your car insurance for the first year, just to get you to sign the paperwork. It's an incredible lever to pull.
Oh.
The guide shows that Sarah's agent negotiated $8,000 in seller concessions.
Which is a massive victory. That $8,000 essentially wiped out her closing costs. Our total out-of-pocket expense to purchase a home, well over $500,000, was just about $2,200.
That is wild. But the guide also flashes a huge warning sign here. Just because the VA does a strict appraisal to protect you, does that mean you can skip hiring your own independent home inspector to save a few bucks?
Never. Never skip the inspection.
Yeah.
The VA appraiser is looking for safety and livability standards, but they are not doing a deep dive into the underlying mechanics of the house. The local hazards in Hawaii are totally different from the mainland.
Like what?
Well, you're dealing with incredibly aggressive termite species, high moisture levels that lead to mold, and rapid roof degradation from the relentless sun and salt air. You have to put down earnest money, which in Hawaii usually runs between $1,000 and $5,000 to show the seller you're serious, but you must use your inspection period to bring in local experts.
Okay, so the offer is accepted. The termite inspector gives the green light, but getting the actual keys involves navigating Hawaii's specific closing laws. And there is a massive elephant in the room we have to talk about regarding what happens when the military inevitably moves this family again.
Right. Let's tackle the timeline and the local quirks first. The typical timeline from an accepted offer to closing the deal is 30 to 45 days. The biggest bottleneck you have to plan for is the VA appraisal itself.
Why does that take so long?
It often takes 2 to 3 weeks to get completed, simply because there is a severe shortage of VA-approved appraisers living on the island.
Ah, that makes sense. And the actual legal mechanism of closing is different in Hawaii compared to a lot of mainland states, right?
Yes. In many states, you hire a real estate attorney who sits at a table and argues over the documents with the seller's attorney. Hawaii is an escrow state. You use an escrow company which acts as a completely neutral third party.
So no fighting at the closing table.
Exactly. They securely hold the buyer's funds and the seller's title, and they only release them when every single condition of the contract has been met. It removes the adversarial nature of the closing table.
The guide also mentioned something shocking about property taxes.
Yeah, Hawaii has some of the lowest property taxes in the entire nation. For Honolulu County residential rates, you're looking at roughly $3.50 per $1,000 of assessed value.
Wait, why is it so cheap? You would think an island with limited land would tax property aggressively.
The state economy relies heavily on tourism. They generate massive amounts of revenue through hotel taxes and a general excise tax on goods and services. That allows them to subsidize and lower the property tax burden for residents.
Wow.
Furthermore, if you declare the home as your primary residence, Hawaii grants a homeowner exemption that reduces your assessed tax value by $100,000.
So what does this all mean for Sarah sitting at her desk back in Virginia? It means she never actually had to fly back to Hawaii to sign a mountain of paperwork. The escrow company facilitated everything remotely. She signed her closing documents via a mobile notary right there in Norfolk.
It's pretty amazing.
The modern convenience of this is staggering. She signs legal papers on the East Coast, and the physical keys to her new Mililani townhome are waiting for her the second she steps off the plane at Hickam in July.
It is an incredibly streamlined operation if you follow the formula and trust the local professionals. But you brought up the elephant in the room earlier. The military is going to move Sarah again in 3 years.
Yep, the inevitable PCS.
This raises an important question for any listener facing a PCS. When you arrive at JBPHH, you essentially have two choices. You can live on base or you can live off base. On-base housing, which is managed by private contractors like Lend-Lease, is undeniably convenient. You are close to work and there's a built-in community. But to live there, you must surrender your entire BAH.
You never even see that $3,912 a month. Doesn't go into your bank account. It just vanishes directly to the housing company.
Exactly. When you choose that convenience, you are walking away from a massive financial opportunity. The long-term wealth strategy detailed in the guide is to buy off base, let the BH pay down your mortgage and build equity for 3 years, and when you get your next set of orders to leave Hawaii, you do not sell the house.
Okay, I don't understand how that works. If you keep the house in Hawaii, how do you afford a place to live at your next duty station? Doesn't the VA loan only apply to your primary residence?
It does apply to primary residences, but this is where the concept of second-tier entitlement comes in. The rental market near military bases in Hawaii is intensely strong. There's a constant influx of new service members looking for housing. So you turn your Mililani townhome into a rental property.
Okay, so the rent pays the old mortgage.
Right, the rent covers the Hawaii mortgage. Then you move to your next duty station. Because the VA lifted loan limits, and because you likely haven't used up your maximum theoretical entitlement on the first house, you can often use your remaining second-tier entitlement to secure a second VA loan for a new primary residence at your new base.
Let me make sure I'm getting this. You buy a house in Hawaii with zero down. 3 years later, you rent it out to another sailor. Their BAH pays your mortgage. You move to, say, California or Texas, and you use the VA loan to buy a second house with zero down while still owning the first one.
That is the exact mechanism. You are legally allowed to have more than one VA loan at a time, provided you have enough remaining entitlement and you intend to occupy the new home as your primary residence.
That is absolutely brilliant. It completely reframes the entire experience. So let's summarize this whole journey. We took a scenario that normally induces pure anxiety, moving a family to one of the most expensive islands on Earth, and broke it down.
Into a highly strategic 6-step formula, yeah.
Right. First, you calculate your guaranteed BAH and unlock that zero-down VA loan superpower.
Then you map the cartography to balance your commute and use your PTDY leave for a tactical house hunt.
Exactly. You lean on a connected local agent to beat cash offers, negotiate those seller concessions, and finally navigate escrow to close from an ocean away. If you understand the mechanisms, you are absolutely not priced out of paradise.
The tools are all sitting right there in the military benefits package. It just requires the knowledge and the strategy to deploy them effectively.
And that leads to a final thought I want you, the listener, to mull over. The guide we explore today focuses on surviving a single 2 to 3 year PCS cycle in Hawaii. But what happens if you zoom out? What if you stop viewing military housing allowances as just a temporary living subsidy and start viewing them as an underutilized, taxpayer-funded seed capital for a localized real estate portfolio?
It's a huge shift in perspective.
Think about the math. If every single PCS over a 20-year military career is an opportunity to acquire a new property with 0% down, 0 PMI, and no loan limits, how does that fundamentally change your financial trajectory? How does that alter the generational wealth of a military family compared to a civilian counterpart who has to scrape together 20% cash for every single down payment? It turns out that terrifying skateboard budget might just be the exact vehicle you need to buy the Ferrari after all.